Hey hooligans, it's Sam. You may have heard recently that social justice warriors or progressives or just plain liberals hate free speech. We hate it so much that we're arbitrarily preventing anyone with even slightly conservative views from speaking at college campuses across the country.
That freedom is now under attack by leftists. I mean, just look at all these hot takes.
The left is killing free speech. The left is silencing free speech. The left turned against free speech.
There's no space for free speech on the left, and not just this bit of the left, most of the left. If you want us to be able to have discussions like this, not just on your show, but on the national news and in the pages of the newspapers, if you believe in that, you cannot vote Democrat.
You shall not pass!
I think that was the president of UC Berkeley not letting the Balrog speak about dwarves taking goblin jobs. Wait, are we thinking of the same free speech? The one people complained about when gay marriage supporters boycott Chick-Fil-A in 2012?
Nationwide protests surrounding Chick-Fil-A.
For years, the highly successful business has donated millions to groups that fight against gay Americans and gay marriage. This week, Chick-fil-A supporters showed their force, crowding restaurants from coast to coast. Chick-fil-A said it was an unprecedented day with record sales.
Jessica Arl and 45 other members of her church group drove more than 60 miles.
We want to be able to practice our freedom of speech.
Whether I agree with you or not, you can practice your business. And there's nothing that in this Constitution that says you can't.
Rita Ross says that she was there and stood in line for 3 hours and says it was worth every minute.
She drove 60 miles and waited 3 hours for lunch. It was worth every second to stick it to those sodomites who refused to eat out on our traditionally married chicken. And who said anything about the Constitution? Before your heterosexual Chicken Appreciation Day, the only thing gay marriage supporters were doing was not buying from a company that gave millions of dollars of funding to organizations that fought against them. If Burger King donated millions of dollars to Planned Parenthood and their CEO went on some show and said, "Abortions for everybody," you wouldn't buy their sandwiches. You'd be on the picket lines. I guess that can't be what conservatives mean when they say they can't get no free speech on college campuses. I know. Jeff Sessions is our Attorney General. He should be well read on the Constitution, the First Amendment, and all of the relevant case law. Mr. Sessions, what are your thoughts?
As Attorney General, does it concern you that these players are being condemned by many, including the President, for exercising their constitutional rights to free speech and protest?
I agree. That is a big mistake to protest in that fashion. There are many ways these players can express their political views other than denigrating symbols of our nation.
You're asked about the most powerful person in our country condemning the free speech of NFL players for kneeling during the national anthem, and it doesn't even occur to you to mention the 1989 Supreme Court case, Texas v. Johnson, that ruled that the First Amendment protects our right to burn the flag? Those players aren't burning shit, they're just bowing their heads.
President-elect Donald Trump is calling for jail time for individuals who set fire to the American flag, also calling for a loss of citizenship. In fact, he tweeted this earlier today.
So our president doesn't believe in free speech. I guess it's no wonder that his attorney general doesn't think much of it either.
In the middle of last decade, there was an effort to pass a constitutional amendment which would supersede that Supreme Court decision. If you look back at that 1989 decision, it's worth noting that it was a closely decided one. It was a 5-4 decision. So this is an issue that is very much a divisive one in this country. And as I said, a majority of people actually supported that amendment that would make flag burning a crime.
Okay, so the flag burning case is controversial. You know what's not so controversial? Our president keeping reporters in a cattle enclosure while everyone else walks around unfettered. But that wasn't really reported on major news networks while they were going apeshit over NFL players exercising their free speech. Let's get back to this conservatives can't get no free speech thing. Who else can we ask? Milo Yiannopoulos fans were saying Twitter violated his free speech. People think he's conservative?
And he said, the president would be the first to affirm that the success of these social networking companies rests on their commitment to First Amendment principles. Now, he wasn't saying you can enforce the First Amendment on private companies.
Just to be clear, the First Amendment is about the government taking away your free speech.
Oh, that's a great point. The First Amendment, which protects free speech, reads, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Freedom of speech is tied closely to the press because our founding fathers wanted to ensure that powerful people would always be publicly criticized. Public criticism was seen as the best way to deter dangerous consolidations of power at the top that might lead to another dictator like King George, who would then oppress the country's straight, white, landowning men. So the First Amendment only protects us from the government, not the government from us, or you and I from one another. But I interrupted. Go on.
The late Aaron Swartz, the founder of Reddit, said, censorship has a meaning outside the government when private companies have a monopoly on certain kinds of speech. Now, Twitter certainly does, not only because it has such a stranglehold on journalism and the media, but also because it's invented an entirely new public square. If you're in a pub and you make a joke that involves race or sex or whatever, and the publican doesn't like it, you can go to another pub down the road. There is no other Twitter.
There's no other Twitter? Have you heard about this new invention called the internet? You see, the internet is a cornucopia of places where you can do all the shitposting you want. And the amazing thing is, it's open 24/7 everywhere in the world. It's incredible. The point is, if you get kicked out of a bar, you've got plenty of other bars to go to. And it doesn't matter that you might not like those other bars, that they're not as big or as popular, that the bar doesn't have a smartphone app, or that you don't piss off their patrons enough for your liking.
Free speech on Twitter means freedom from conservatives. Freedom from different points of view. It's freedom from ever having to be exposed to anything that might make you feel uncomfortable. Well, that's not what freedom of speech is.
Oh, that does sound horrible. Why was it you were banned from Twitter again?
It began as a standard Hollywood production.
But within a few days of the movie's release, Leslie Jones was subjected to incredibly vicious attacks on Twitter. Many of the attacks, known as trolling, came from anonymous users, but not all of them.
So, not so much because you're a conservative as because you're an asshole.
So long as there is a politics in this country, as there is, where people can turn victimhood and grievance into currency, I will continue to be as offensive as possible.
So I printed out a couple of those.
Go right
ahead.
Okay, so I posted them, I'm sure I'm fine. Yeah, I said the women in it were fat and ugly and fat, and they are, and I'll tell you why I find this problematic. We've started to marginalise traditional beauty standards, Now what we're expected to do is to celebrate body positivity. What I'm trying to do is draw attention to a critique of what's happening in mainstream beauty culture, and that comes from compassion.
I like to think of myself as a virtuous troll, I'm doing God's work.
It's just like in the book of Matthew. You have heard that it was said, eye for eye and tooth for tooth. But I tell you not to resist an evil person. If someone slaps you on your cheek, turn to him the other cheek also. But if you don't like a movie remake, harass the creators like a pack of rabid howler monkeys. They deserve it.
I think actually America's had enough of nice manners. Trolling is very important.
Why?
Trolling is absolutely essential. America needs more trolling because trolls are the only people who tell the truth these days.
If you want people to take your free speech argument seriously, maybe the way to accomplish that isn't harassing people over movies you don't like and then playing the victim when it bites you. What was that you said about victimhood as currency? Or maybe if you want more respect, don't pretend that fatty boombalatti is some kind of serious social criticism from a place of compassion.
And no, you can't make jokes in this country anymore. You can't make you cannot make innocent jokes in this country anymore without running serious risk of professional damage and social censure. You're at risk from one of these mobs coming after you.
Ooh, comedy! I get to visit the wheelhouse. You can actually say a lot more now than you could in the 50s or 60s. You remember the 50s when married couples couldn't sleep in the same bed together on a TV show? You ever heard of a guy named Lenny Bruce? He was a comedian in the 60s. Bruce was arrested 4 times from 61 to 64 for swearing in jizz clubs. The words in question included cocksucker and schmuck. At that same time in the 60s, a lot of blacks, especially civil rights leaders like Martin Luther King, were jailed for expressing their free speech, like praying in front of a city hall. King wrote his famous Letter from an Alabama Jail after that kind of an arrest. But I'm off topic. We were talking about liberals silencing conservatives, and Milo was whining about being kicked out of Twitter's Popular Kids Club and being forced to use the stinky old internet to mount harassment campaigns on the latest kitsch movie remake. But we all know by now that weaponized douchebaggery is just Milo's MO. What about those college campuses we heard about? Are there silenced conservatives trying to say something more insightful or perhaps more conservative than fatty boombalatti? Tucker Carlson and Coulter, either of you want to weigh in on this?
Well, for centuries, freedom of speech has been America's signature right, but college students aren't interested at all. They may not even know it exists. A new survey by Gallup finds that 53% of college students say that having a diverse and inclusive society is more important than protecting free speech.
They don't even know it exists! While they're answering survey questions about it. Go on.
This is, of course, another problem of immigration.
So, Immigrants get here and they say, "Finally, I've made it to America, the land of the free. Now I can saddle myself with your crushing student debt. I'll be a slave to my student loans for the rest of my life, like a true free American."
All kinds of surveys done over the years show that white and black Americans overwhelmingly support both free speech and gun rights, and you have almost the reverse percentages with recent immigrants. White students are only 30% of the population at Berkeley.
I looked it up, and it turns out Coulter's right that UC Berkeley has more Latinos and Asians, specifically in 2017. Let's take a closer look at Gallup's demographic surveys that they mentioned.
They were commenting on a 2017 survey, but I'm going to start with the earlier 2016 data. Here are some of the questions they asked from college students around the U.S. Do you think freedom of speech is better or worse than it was 20 years ago? I don't know about 98, but I'm not getting arrested for saying schmuck in my routines. As you might expect, only the conservative students believe that free speech is worse than it was 20 years ago. When asked whether free speech or a positive environment was more important, they overwhelmingly agree that speech is more important. They don't even know it exists!
No, no, no.
Yes!
They overwhelmingly agree, again, by more than 2 to 1, that upsetting or offensive political views should be allowed. And they agree that the free press is at least as important today as it was 20 years ago, despite some slight differences in their preferred news sources.
So, overall, we're seeing some minor controversy and a lot of support among these college students for freedom of speech, regardless of their politics.
The 2017 survey showed a slight decrease in students' faith in the protections of free speech, and perhaps paradoxically, a slight increase in their trust of news media. Not much else had changed over the year.
So why are our corporations abetting this, making it worse? Kroger, the grocery chain, announced today that it will no longer stock magazines with photographs of assault weapons. Since when are companies sort of piling on speech restrictions here?
So, to protect free speech, we need to eliminate the free market? I'm pretty sure that free speech isn't making sure that grocery stores buy your shitty tabloid with pictures of double D flag bikini girls waving machine guns around. Why do certain people always go back to that? Like the Chick-Fil-A boycott, or whenever some pundit like Rush Limbaugh loses sponsors, they say conservatives are being silenced. If that's the bar for you to call foul on free speech, then conservatives have to start buying The New Yorker and fashionable clothes and shopping at Hot Topic. I'm looking for a Funko Pop doll that says I believe in free markets, lowering taxes, and traditional marriage.
Has there ever been a more obedient little cadre of robots than college students? Does anybody think, is anyone brave? Is anybody giving the finger to the man and speaking the truth? Where are those people? What happened?
Yes, they're such mindless robots for disagreeing with you. And why aren't they out protesting or something? Sorry, I got off topic there. So we saw some data on what those crazy college robots think about free speech. Do we have some historical data on Americans as a whole?
We turn to the comprehensive data made available through the General Social Survey.
Oh, thanks, Stefan Molyneux. Stefan Molyneux. Wikipedia says he's a conservative, so let's see what he says.
This is the data from 1972 all the way through to 2016. In general, there's some positive trends here. You can see all of these lines are all on the upward trends of yes, we should allow them to speak. What has actually declined, the only one that has declined, is racist. So this is the question that was actually asked in the survey. Suppose this admitted communist wanted to make a speech in your community. Should he be allowed to speak or not?
Oh good! So public support of a communist free speech has improved markedly since '72, regardless of party.
Anti-religionists, the homosexual, the militarist, the racist.
Democrats versus Republicans. So here we can see there is more tendency for the Republicans to allow for freedom of speech versus the Democrats, with the exception of homosexuality.
Again, they're virtually identical. We liberals are supposed to loathe free speech, remember? We're supposed to be firing mortars and rockets at it, not a 4% difference of opinion.
And we can see that as the demographics of the West changes, free speech begins to decay. It is decaying throughout Western Europe, it is decaying in Canada, it is decaying as a whole, and the question is, what does this have to do with demographics?
So much decay! Look at that! We're just decaying it up. It's nothing but worm food now. Decay is the word for something getting stronger, right? Part of the problem here is that the GSS are just getting on the phone to random Baptists in rural Alabama. Hey Bubba Joe, we got some commies and queers and godless atheists giving speeches at your local town hall. Can I get an amen? When you do that, you get a lot of people who don't agree on every category. That doesn't mean they hate free speech.
Among millennials, 44% are free speech absolutists. And again, we can see on college campuses and other places that the intolerance of free speech is growing.
Millennials, god damn it, is there nothing safe? Record stores in the fashion industry and fast food, and now free speech?
If you have bad ideas, you don't want to be subject to the scrutiny of free speech, to the marketplace of ideas. You don't want to be challenged. And if you're on the left and you have bad ideas, you're going to support immigration from demographics that don't support free speech, because then you're going to be able to chisel away at free speech and shield your bad ideas from criticism.
Oh, it's a conspiracy! Liberals don't advocate more inclusive immigration policy for any of the reasons we say, like that statistically immigrants add to the economy and commit less crime, or that we see immigration as an American value because we're a country of immigrants. No, as liberals, we believe ourselves to be stupid. So instead, we've hatched an ingenious conspiracy to destroy free speech by welcoming Asians and Latinos. And it's working! The marketplace of ideas will be utterly destroyed in 80 or 90 years, give or take. Getting back to the subject of silenced conservatives on college campuses, I keep hearing about UC Berkeley. Let's see what happened there. Oh, I see there were several protests and a couple of riots in 2017. The first one was Milo in February, about 10 days after Trump's inauguration.
Got the BlackRock people out in force. They just showed up a couple of minutes ago, completely changed the tone of the demonstration, what had been largely peaceful. It is a minority group that just came in a little while ago, Alan. They do not represent everybody here. I would say about 1,500 to 2,000. It's hard to tell because you have people walking through this area at the same time. No violence except for at the building.
Nothing going on in the crowd?
Attacking the building, not the people that may be going in.
Okay.
The university wasn't all that in favor of this happening, but they felt it was a free speech effort, and it was something that they felt as a public institution they had to hold.
Okay, that was probably a bad idea. Thankfully, injuries were limited, but all that violence was the Black Bloc group, not liberals in general like Milo claims. They estimated 100 to 150 Black Bloc protesters, but a total of 1,500 protesters in general. So for every Black Bloc person wrecking the place up, there were 10 to 15 liberal protesters just exercising their free speech. I don't blame every conservative for Dylan Roof's murders, or for the rash of white supremacist murders across the country. As I mentioned in a previous video, white supremacists committed 74% of the terrorist attacks in the US from 2001 to 2016. Half the deaths and the attacks are occurring with increasing frequency. So there's good reason for us to be angry here, but I don't try to claim that's because my neighbor doesn't believe in climate change. Here, I'll show you. Here's a Black Bloc protester. And here's a liberal. I know, it's hard to tell. It's a subtle difference, I get it. So, that was the Yiannopoulos event. What happened next in Berkeley?
Well, on this March 4th, several March for Trump rallies were held across the nation by supporters of the president. And in Berkeley, a small pro-Trump rally and counter-protest devolved into punches with multiple fistfights reported there.
Oh, I didn't know there were so many Trump supporters in Berkeley. Wait, no. Berkeley voted 90% to 3 for Hillary Clinton. Berkeley was the second worst city for Trump in the entire country. That's like planning a Satanist parade in the parking lot of an Alabama Baptist church. That's like planning a speech in Tel Aviv, Israel titled, "The Holocaust! You fuckers had it coming!" That's not how you celebrate. You don't seek out the biggest crowd of haters and then drive hundreds of miles to rub shit in their face. That's what you do when you're planning to start a fight. And of course, both sides at the March for Trump event claimed that the other side threw the first punches, which is a convenient trick for a group who want to start a fight. Who do we believe? It's their word against yours. Rich Black, who organized Berkeley's March for Trump, then organized a thinly veiled quote-unquote free speech rally, also in Berkeley, only a month later, despite there being an entire country in which he could organize his events. And the Supreme Court doesn't support that. You can't deliberately start a fight and then use the First Amendment to shield yourself from consequences.
When two young women, one of them wearing a hijab, boarded the train, and Jeremy Christian immediately went on a hate-filled tirade. The suspected killer only making it a few blocks before he was arrested. Is shown here at a freedom of speech rally last month, giving a Nazi salute.
Free speech or die, Portland. You got no safe place. This is America. Get out if you don't like free speech. Death to the enemies of America. Leave this country if you hate our freedom. Death to Antifa. You call it terrorism, I call it patriotism. You hear me? Die.
It's always gotta be a battle with you people. Everybody wants to fight and stir.
My free speech, man! My knife was just saying, build that wall to his face! Suck it! It's not often invoked in court, but one of the few narrow restrictions on free speech is called the fighting words doctrine.
Hey you, let's fight! Them's fighting words.
You can't just say free speech to get a pass on harassing or assaulting people. The whole point of the First Amendment is to prevent the powerful from inflicting harm on the vulnerable. So while the First Amendment protects unpopular, even hateful speech, it doesn't protect dangerous speech.
The classic example is the 1919 Supreme Court case Schneck v. United States, in which Oliver Wendell Holmes wrote, loosely paraphrased, "You can't shout fire in a crowded theater." So if a particular statement is designed to cause harm in the near future, and is likely to do so, it's not protected speech. The 1969 Supreme Court case Brandenburg v. Ohio struck down Ohio's criminal syndicalism statute. The ruling meant that you can't be arrested for advocating violence in the abstract, like when an Antifa activist advocates punching Nazis. That doesn't mean he can say, "There's Richard Spencer! Get him!" That's why we still have laws saying you can't incite a riot, which is clearly what the Berkeley March for Trump was doing.
And we've even become more lenient when it comes to fighting words. In 1942, Chaplinsky was arrested for calling someone a damn fascist, and the Supreme Court sided with the police. If we use that same measuring stick today, we wouldn't have a prison crowding problem. We'd just wall off the whole country. Meanwhile, black people still have to worry that today might be the day that they get arrested for sitting in a coffee shop. And Milo gives speeches about how he thinks Black Lives Matter is an enemy of free speech. So far, we're not finding much evidence that conservatives are being silenced on every college campus. But we're still working on this UC Berkeley lead.
Created a free speech commission assigned to make policy recommendations that might reduce disruption at controversial events.
On April 10th, the commission released this report, a 6-month project in the making, a process that included consideration of testimony from students, the broader campus community, the mayor, the city attorney, the police captain, and others.
Curious, it doesn't appear the commission consulted those speakers who were actually deplatformed.
I'm terribly sorry you've been mugged, ma'am. I just have a few questions, if you don't mind. How do you think we can stop muggings in the future?
Shapiro next spoke at UC Berkeley in September 2017, this time met by hundreds of protesters and a $600,000 security bill, with 9 people arrested during that event.
9 people arrested? There was only 1 person arrested at the Milo event, even though there were over 100 Black Bloc protesters. Let's have a closer look at that Ben Shapiro event. Are there more Black Bloc?
An Antifa member, arrested Thursday night for carrying a deadly weapon at the Berkeley protest, had met with Hillary Clinton prior to the event. Of the 2 women arrested, Sarah Rourke, 44, was arrested for carrying a banned weapon.
Sarah Rourke? Oh shit, that's a friend of mine. She had a deadly weapon? I've never known her to be violent.
This was about as militant as it got outside. About 20 protesters refusing to leave a breezeway between buildings. Berkeley police released mugshots of 2 arrests. And Sarah Rourke of San Francisco for carrying a banned weapon. Rourke argued with officers over a sign she was trying to bring in.
Here's your deadly weapon. A cardboard sign, more than 30 inches on a side. Not on a wooden stick or anything, just light cardboard easily held in one hand. It does look a bit wordy. Maybe she was going to bore someone to death with it. Anyway, that's who they arrested at Shapiro's event in September. Several people with overly large signage. But that was still before the university published their report on how to deal with the fighting. What did they have to say about it?
What changed such that the same speaker was greeted so differently within only a little over a year's time?
Our conclusion, the report says, the 2016 presidential election encouraged far-right and alt-right activists.
Oh, hey, we won, and now we're going to shove it in your face by bringing these speakers.
It's hard to argue that something was thrown in your face when you have the option simply not to attend the event. If you don't like the touchdown celebration, don't go to the game. It's really that easy.
Unless the players leave the stadium and come to your living room for their touchdown celebration. Remember, white supremacist murders doubled in 2017. By the time of Shapiro's event in September, there was loads of evidence of that and other violence from white supremacists across the country. And sure, some people might choose to ignore that. But if you've ever heard of good Germans, it's not unreasonable to feel a responsibility to protest racists.
It was all a big conspiracy, you see, a coordinated effort between very small groups of students and outside organizations working to provoke American campuses into a violent reaction to advance a narrative that universities are not tolerant of conservative speech. Shame on you, you still took the bait. If you're truly tolerant of distasteful views, there is no way to bait you into a violent reaction anyhow. A tolerant person says, oh hey look, there's a speaking event tonight. But you know what? That guy's not really for me. I guess I'll go do something else with my tolerant life.
Most of the time that's true, which is why the fighting words doctrine is rarely invoked in court. But the Supreme Court disagrees with your thesis that it's impossible.
Students and staff felt threatened not just by the messages of the speakers, but by the large police presence required to assure everyone's safety.
So you create calamity. If you want peace of mind, start providing it yourself.
This report itself noted that Ben Shapiro previously spoke at Berkeley with no adverse effects. What changed is not some grand conspiracy to harm you. What changed is your campus hysteria.
Campus hysteria! Hysteria! The signs are too big! Sarah Rourke was a resident of Berkeley. The violence came from people who didn't live or attend school in Berkeley, who drove hours across country to pick those fights. The same thing happened to Charlottesville. People drove from all over the country to pick the fight that ended in Heather Heyer's death. But somehow when it happens at Berkeley, it's Berkeley's fault for hysteria on campus. Seems a little victim-blamey.
Because the commission misdiagnoses the problem so badly, their recommended solutions are comically inaccurate too.
The report's list of recommendations buries the lead. They note that potential solutions include relocating free speech zones away from resource centers for triggered students, making the police less intimidating by giving them plain clothes instead of uniforms, asking for state funding for increased security needs. It's not until the very last recommendation to university leadership that the report actually addresses the heart of the problem. Support a free speech culture. Finally,
the commission encourages the administration to uphold a culture that is hospitable to a wide spectrum of thought and opinion, and to provide a positive example to our students of constructive and thoughtful debate between passionate advocates for opposing points of view. Not finally. Firstly, you don't say, oh, we'll do our best to foster a free speech culture after we do all this other crap. You say free speech culture is priority number one. You say, particularly as a public institution, the Cal Berkeley administration will uphold the rights of all speakers within the full scope of the First Amendment. You say anyone who threatens that value with violence will be punished by the school and prosecuted to the full extent of the law.
Matt Christiansen is like the naive substitute teacher who can't control the classroom.
Guys, class.
The reason a, quote, culture of free speech is the last on their list is because it's the least plausibly effective, no matter how much you might not like the other options.
You've got at least 3 problems. First, the campus of UC Berkeley already has a culture of free speech, so you'd be preaching to the choir. Check the survey data if you're still unclear on that. Second, the rioting Black Bloc protesters knew they were breaking the law. That's why they're Black Bloc. Understanding the nuances of Supreme Court case Tinker v. Des Moines black armbands isn't going to suddenly break them of their convictions about civil disobedience.
Last and most importantly, the brawlers drove from out of state. You can have mandatory free speech lectures every damn day at Berkeley. It won't reach the dudes throwing the punches while they're slugging shots in a bar in Las Vegas. This is the problem with thinking you can do better than a team of people working on a problem for 6 months just because you've got Google and a camera and a few hours to kill. The point is, this is a complicated problem and you can't just Jedi mind trick it away.
You say free speech or get the fuck out, you commie motherfucker.
Like this?
Free speech or die, Portland. You got no safe place. This is America. Get out if you don't like free speech.
That was kind of a big part of the problem in the first place. In fact, the alt-right people were so obviously intentionally starting fights so they could disingenuously claim free speech martyrdom that even some of the more conscientious members of their lot, people referred to as the alt-light, balked when they planned a rally on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial and held a competing rally elsewhere in D.C. just to throw shade.
Coulter also when these losers and freaks who are having some other, oh, we're a bunch of liars rally, when they tried to shut down this rally, when they tried to ruin it, he said, fuck you. Free speech is only meaningful when you say something that's powerful, when you say something that threatens the system, when you say something that's radically truthful, when you say something that shatters the lies, that shatters those in power. That is the time when free speech really matters.
Still looking for that martyr status, Team Spencer complained that those guys didn't support his free speech because they refused to share the stage at the Lincoln Memorial. That's a bit like saying somebody doesn't support your sexual orientation if they won't let you masturbate in their kitchen.
I told you I'm mayosexual.
Anyway, I'm sure that the current spate of riots at Berkeley is over now that Richard Spencer has announced that they're just giving up on starting these fights in the first place.
You're the true nonviolent protesters.
We're not nonviolent. We'll fucking kill these people if we have to.
We're going to have to be as radical as ever. We're going to have to be as independent as ever. We're just simply going to have to find a different MO. This movement is probably going to enter a new stage. There was the meme war stage, the IRL stage of the alt-right. The IRL stage, when we went IRL and off the internet, we really inspired pushback.
I've been told that there's a warrant out for my arrest. And I don't know what to do. I want to be peaceful. I want to be law-abiding. Okay, that was the whole entire point of this. And I'm watching CNN talk about this as violent white nationalist protests. We have done everything in our power to keep this peaceful. You know, we're not nonviolent. We'll fucking kill these people. We'll fucking kill these people. We'll fucking kill these people. I'm armed. I do not want violence with you. All right, I'm terrified. I'm afraid you're going to kill me. I really am. All right, so we'll fucking kill these people. Just let's do this however we need to do it. You know, if I gotta go to jail today, you know, it won't be the fucking first time. I do not fucking fight with people. You know, you would have heard about it by now, right? If I was a violent guy, you would have heard about it by now. We'll fucking kill these people.
Oh, and there's one other thing.
But as far as government regulation, I mean, yes, I think in the short term we would favor government regulation of speech, but long term, are we even pro-free speech?
No, of course not. But we have to use this platform in order.
So we're being radically honest here. And,
yes,
yeah.
Radically pragmatic. Yes. Yeah.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoy my comedy, please like and subscribe below, and you can also find down there the link to my Patreon. You can help create more of this comedy and also get sneak peeks and other great rewards. Thanks for stopping by, and I'll catch you next time.
Losers and freaks who are having some other, oh, we're a bunch of liars rally. Free speech is only meaningful when you say something that's radically truthful, when you say something that shatters the lies. That is the time when free speech really matters.